so again, this was a person who was never going to be replicated, and people may try, it's never going to happen. Mm-hmm. So I think it's just very important that we just make sure that we honor her. And I do hope that the next honoring of Aaliyah, well, two things I hope for her.
Yeah, TikTok, I'm just rolling on the block. Marisa, Tigney, heard that. Podcast show about to start. Heard that. You should know if entertainment is your goal. You talking sports or travel, yo. This the hottest pod show. Heard that. She got her shoes. Everything she says is truth. If you don't know, now you know. All you ever gotta say is heard that. Heard that. Heard that. Heard that. Heard that. Look, all you ever gotta say.
What's up, Heard That Nation? Listening in the United States and around the world, you are listening now to the Heard That with Marisa Tigney podcast. If you have the pleasure right now watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button so that you be in the know of any future guests that I have on the show, like this amazing woman here today. And I want to get it right because it's my show and I'm going to consider her as hip hop royalty because I can. I am so excited to have her here. Hip hop journalist who has written for numerous publications, The Vibe, The Source, Rolling Stone, The Village Voice, just to name a few. I'm in the presence right now of an NYU professor and author of God Save the Queens, The Essential History of Women in Hip Hop, which I know I need to pick up after reading this incredible book right here. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see all my little bookmarks that are in here. Baby Girl, better known as Aaliyah. If you are a fan of hip hop, you are a big fan of Aaliyah. I don't think there's a bigger fan than the guests that I have here today. Please welcome Kathy Iandoli. I hope I said that right.
Iandoli, but yeah.
Iandoli. We rehearsed this too. Kathy Iandoli. Welcome to the Heard That podcast.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for this incredible book of this artist that I believe over and over again is just absolutely timeless. Every time that I hear a song come on the radio, or I have a couple of her songs, many songs in fact, downloaded on my playlist, and it's just like I can't believe that one, the age that she was when she recorded certain songs like 15, 16, 17, 18, just the maturity of her voice. Right. And that so many artists that are inspired by her, and Cash Doll is one of the ones that I can think of, because when I look at her IG page, she's so inspired and will just say it all throughout how Aaliyah has influenced her as an artist, and so many other people that we'll discuss momentarily. But take me back to a young Kathy when she first fell in love with hip hop, because for me, the 80s and going into the 90s, I fell in love when I heard Run DMC and Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five, the Beastie Boys. So many of those hip hop genres, and hearing the medleys, hearing the beat, hearing the flow. When it came to rap, what was your first love? It could be an artist before we go and dive into Aaliyah, because obviously your love for Aaliyah, it speaks volumes in this book. But who was your first love when you were listening first to hip hop?
It was Ladies First. The Ladies First video was the one that did it for me. Mm-hmm. Seeing Queen Latifah and Moni Love, I was like 10 years old. Mm-hmm. And when I saw that video, I was a child of my favorite artist growing up was Michael Jackson, right? Mm-hmm. And then like from Michael Jackson, I went into like Debbie Gibson and New Kids on the Block. Like I got very much, I embraced the teeny bop, like pop stars. And then I saw this video and I was like, hold on, and they're singing the hook and the force of the rhymes. Like I didn't understand what was going on, but I knew that I really liked it. Mm-hmm. It came all together for me, arguably, no, actually most definitely in 1992 when TLC arrived, right? Mm-hmm. So at 10 years old, I was still kind of like, oh, I really like this. And then, but I also still like, New Kids on the Block. I like this, I like that, Debbie Gibson, Electric Youth, like all these like other things were happening. It was 1992. I was 13 years old and Ooh on the TLC tip came out. And I saw the video for Ain't Too Proud to Beg. And that marked that transformation for me, where I ditched everything else and just like my full focus went into hip hop. And it was funny because everything changed for me, my style of clothing. I I had balled up like green saran wrap, and I, in between 89 and 92, I was also just like really into a different world, right?
Yeah.
So I had the Dwayne Wayne glasses.
Mm-hmm.
And I like balled up green saran wrap and put it on top of a cutout index card, and I put it over the one eye because I didn't know what left eye I had on her eye. I didn't know it was a condom. So I used to wear that around my Dwayne Wayne glasses and this thing. And then I had the cross color t-shirt and like the cross color jeans, or like Carl Kanai jeans, and the my mother wouldn't let me have the unbutton my fly t-shirt.
Yeah.
The t-shirt, you remember?
And I remember that because I went to a private school, then going into college, and there were certain restrictions of having that kind of dress, and you're like, you can't be so provocative, and then let alone me being in a private school. It was a Christian school, so certain stuff like that I couldn't even wear in One Express. But when that bell came, the shirt was underneath the shirt, and all that I wanted to express about the love of hip hop that you had. Yeah.
And I remember I was like, I want the unbutton my fly t-shirt. My mom was like, no. So, but I did have the Looney Tunes characters, the girls who were dressed like TLC, like oh my gosh, I wish I still had that t-shirt. But that was like, the point was, that marked a turning point for me as I was leaving, grammar school, going into high school. The love affair with hip hop started really then. That very much shaped my identity, like as I entered into my teenage years. So, and then that brought me to 2 years later when I first encountered Aaliyah. So it was kind of like this progression.
Like you and I were talking before coming on here about the authentic beauty in her voice, the quality of her voice, the maturity of her voice. And the first time I heard her Back and Forth was the song, and it played at a wedding. And I was dancing with somebody, but then I stopped. I'm going, who is this singing? This voice is just amazing. And the person I was dancing with is like, what are you doing? You're looking funny on the dance floor. And I'm like, now hold on. Because this is a whole, different vocal arrangement and talent that I've not heard in a while. So what was it a song for you? First her coming out, you said 2 years after, TLC, that you were like, oh my gosh, I am just, who is this? I need to know who she is. I want to go to all her shows. Does she have when is she releasing music? All of that stuff, with Aaliyah.
It was the world premiere of the Back and Forth video on MTV. And
I remember that.
I was watching it when it happened, and I was like, I just, the interesting part about Aaliyah, and this is very much a continuation of like my relationship with hip hop and going into just experiencing Aaliyah. When you think about the 90s R&B artists, how they dressed, their vibe, the female artists in particular, their vibe was not as in line with the aesthetic of hip hop artists, right? Like I modeled my entire life after Left Eye, right? Like I thought like I wanted to dress just like Left Eye, and 2000 Chili too, but more it was Lisa who had the vibe about her. And when I saw Aaliyah in the Back and Forth video, it's an R&B song, but she just exuded hip hop too, like her style. You could just tell she was a child of hip hop, and we're the same age, and it was like you could just tell. And in the video, when she does that dance, I remember just watching like, what is happening, right? And I was just taken. And then I made my mom take me to Sam Goody. Shout out to Sam Goody, which a year later, a year later became the place I would work for 5 years. But I went there and I got the cassette single. And I can't, to this day, and I should hit one of my executive friends over at Jive, because to this day, I cannot tell if I had a broken tape or if they purposely made the song go back and forth, like the sound when I would play it on my tape recorder, it would go back, forth. The sound went back and forth. And to this day, I still don't know. I used to call it the seasick version because it would just go back and forth.
Right,
and
right.
The tape was broken. By the time the album came out, that was not a problem because I bought it on CD.
Mm-hmm.
But I really like burned a hole in that cassette. And that really started my just, love affair with Aaliyah's music. And by the time we got to 1 in a Million, 1996 was just such another impactful year for me, as a fan of music, as a human, as a woman. I was 17 years old, and the Fugees came out with the score.
Mm-hmm.
Aaliyah comes out with 1 in a Million. Little Kim comes out with Hardcore.
That year, it was just jam packed with so many either new artists or new music coming out.
Jay-Z. And it was the year I started working at a record store, which for me felt like peak identity, right?
Mm-hmm.
I work at a record store now, and like all this music was happening, and it was such an important year for me. And Aaliyah was like at the top of that for me, even by the time, by her second album, when she was like actually Aaliyah, I don't really feel like the first album was all her in a sense, but you felt her by 96. So for me, that was like the moment where I was like, I went from she's so super cool to like, she's just everything.
I like how the way that you wrote in the book, obviously the introduction so that people know, I mean, if you've been living under a rock, which most people I know who Aaliyah was, it still is because her legacy lives on 20 plus years later. I love how you gradually, the reader, myself, and many people, and I'll ask you that later on, because you got some really great comments on the back of the book from well-known people, one of them being the Academy Award nominated Questlove, by the way. I pray that he wins. Absolutely great documentary, Summer of Soul. That you take the timeline of her, and I got to tell you, Kathy, it was a difficult read. Of the beginning of her an encounter with R. Kelly, and all the turn events that has now happened and recently happened with so many of the survivors coming out. And there was a couple of times I had to put the book down because it's just like I felt myself getting upset at him of what he did and so forth. But then I had to look at it at her as the talent and her performing with Gladys Knight at the age of 10. And starting to become a vocalist of her own, and gradually building from there and building her brand from there. From that, and how you beautifully done that, and it still shocks me that you never met her. I felt through the book that you knew her, that you two hung out, that you two had a rapport, because the way that you wrote it, the essence of it, it was just absolutely brilliant. Take me through when you were writing this book. And I keep saying beautifully written because it is. For myself, as a person that had followed Aaliyah, not the extensive that you have, and so many other fans that I knew that know, there's so many memories that you had, great memories. And I can give you an example, the Tommy Hilfiger thing, when she became a trendsetter. Yes. I mean, immediately when you wrote about that and the outfit that she wore, because, Tommy Hilfiger back then had gotten himself in some hot water of the comments that he made and say, some people of color, we should be wearing his clothes. As I'm looking at my wardrobe going, but I like what you have, and I don't drop a good dime on all this stuff. So what do you mean I'm not allowed to wear it? But she catapulted, as you wrote in the book, that Tommy Hilfiger needed Aaliyah, and more than she needed him. How did when you were writing this, did you keep the reader in mind, like myself, to to enhance those memories that popped up. Because like I said, Tommy Hilfiger, the whole campaign with that and everything else. When you were writing that yourself, I'm sorry, I'm just so excited when I was reading this amazing book.
Thank you.
The memories of what she had accomplished in her short life. What was the accomplishment that you wanted to do and set for the reader when they were reading this incredible book?
Well, I think there were levels to it, right? For me personally, as a fan, I held on to those happy moments because I knew that there were parts of the book that were pretty dark, right? So I had made sure, to kind of make these moments as big as possible, right? That we felt them because they were big for the world too. The one interesting thing that I found was Tommy Hilfiger never went on TV with that statement that they accused him of, which was interesting because it makes you think about, like, if that had happened now, he would have gone on Twitter and said, I never, whatever. Like, there's no, they said he went on Oprah and said it, and he had never actually been on Oprah before.
Right.
On Oprah after the rumor circulated, to, I believe, correct it. But there was never an incident where he came and said that
he never said it. Yeah.
So the thing about Aaliyah with that campaign, and I had the picture, the one where she's like by the turntables,
yes,
that was like hanging up in my locker. And then there was like the other one where she's got the headphones and she's about to, that was in my locker too. And what Aaliyah did for Tommy Hilfiger was, like, she opened that door for other women in fashion, but Tommy Hilfiger did not have the presence of Black women in fashion in his ads. He had Kidada Jones working behind the scenes, and she eventually came to the front too when he was kind of developing that little crew that was Pete Hudson was in there, Mark Ronson, he was building that group, but it was Aaliyah who was the difference, right? And like, she was the one who set this trend, and the way that I put this line in the book, and I said, she wasn't wearing Tommy Hilfiger's clothes. I forget what it said. Something along the lines of, like, she was the star in their clothes.
She wasn't wearing Tommy Hilfiger's clothes. Something like that. You were saying that basically Tommy Hilfiger was wearing Aaliyah or something like that. That's how you said it. Yeah.
And those moments are the ones that, like, my publisher was like, oh, do you really need a Tommy girl chapter? And I said, yeah, because I pushed for that chapter because first of all, it was monumental to the fashion world and what Aaliyah contributed to the space. And it also, that particular style set a tone for the girls of today are still dressing like her, even young men and, even non-binary people are all dressing in this very similar aesthetic that it was Aaliyah who put forward. So I wanted moments like that in the book because there's people like myself and you who remember those moments, and we get taken back to a point in time where we're like, oh my gosh, remember this and this. But then I was also just painting the picture of what the environment was like for all of the new Aaliyah fans who are like 15 years old, who weren't even alive when she was alive, and wanted to paint that picture for them because they weren't here for it, right? So it's a combination of nostalgia, but also information, of painting a picture of a time period, because all they have right now are YouTube clips and like videos and photos and stuff.
Right.
But it's a little bit different when you're like really setting the stage and trying to bring that era back in the writing. And that was extremely important to me, just for a number of reasons. So yeah, I held on to a lot of those moments. I wanted that for the book.
I think you did it very well, because throughout I found myself reflecting too, okay, when this particular song came out, I was at on campus at Michigan State University, kicking with it with my girls, and we was going roller skating, or If Your Girl Only Knew, which That song right there was fire because of the fact that the way that her voice was building in the song and the melodies were building with it, and then she would do that intro like, if your girl, oh, I'm like, oh shoot. And then we would be with the one be like, so and so, this is their theme song because they going behind their dude's back, and this is, or they're, you know, and doing this, and all this other stuff. And just the range that she had and the trendsetter that she was and still is. I found myself going back to certain places and certain spaces where I was at in the 90s, whether it be, like I said, you know, skating or on campus, or, you know, taking a break and kicking it at a basketball game and all that. So with all of that and going through the late 90s, and we talked about so many various artists that were coming out and all that, and Aaliyah coming to her own, I do not know one person that when they got 1 in a Million wore that CD out. I did. And I had to buy another one because shame on me for loaning it to somebody. I never saw it again. But 1 in a Million, silly me, now I can download it. But 1 in a Million, I felt two things, actually several things of Aaliyah, is that she was transitioning out of age ain't nothing but a number. You know, she had the baggy clothes and she had these glasses, the hair that every girl, including myself, wanted to have, that long layered bob, because her hair was just absolutely, all of her imagery was just absolutely stunning. But 1 in a Million started to transition her into, you know, she started to grow. She started to, you know, her voice is starting to be enhanced. It's not being controlled. If that is, you know, fine to say from what it was with Age Is Nothing But a Number, we're hearing Aaliyah having her say, having her way in this record, and having a great team around it. And what I found that was so great, what you did, is not only talk about Aaliyah and, you know, what her next chapter was, because that transition from when she was under the control of R. Kelly, I mean, let's be real with it, to, you know, working with Timbaland and Missy and Static Major, big difference in as far as vocal range and creative content and creative control too. With that, I didn't know certain things of 1 in a Million and how much Static Major had his thumbprint on that, God rest his soul, as well as Timbaland and Missy. I knew about them, but tell the people that are listening and watching, one, who Static Major was, because not a lot of people, when I was talking to folks behind the scenes and saying that you were going to be a guest on, it was surprising to me that those that were fans of 90s music and fans of Aaliyah did not know a whole lot about Static Major.
Really?
Yes, which was surprising to me. Because I'm like, are you kidding me? His resume for the short years, because he was only, unfortunately, was lost at 33 years old.
Yeah.
But I was like, okay, if you're a true fan of hip hop and R&B, you should know about Static Major.
Yeah, I mean, you know, Stephen Static Major Garrett was a singer-songwriter, producer. You know, 1/3 of the group Playa, but also a part of the swing mob where Timbaland, Missy, Genuine, you know, the engineer Jimmy Douglas, along with a number of other people, had kind of all come together in upstate New York to help Devontae Swing put together Jodeci's the show, The After Party, The Hotel. And you know, people have spoken at great length about this experience and how kind of traumatic it was, the way that the whole thing was set up, where it was like Hunger Game style, like write these songs and who's gonna do whatever, and like competitive and stuff. But you know, Static was a part of that, and through the whole process of when Aaliyah entered what I guess we could call her prime, right? Static was behind 2 songs prior to the Aaliyah project, the final album, that I think had the most impact. There's one thing that I do want people to know about Static, you know, outside of everything else, you know, if we're going to pull like one of the songs that even after Aaliyah passed that Static was known for, it's Lil Wayne's Lollipop, you know. Static's voice, he was able to replicate voices for the songs that he helped create. He was able to kind of make shifts in these voices, in his own voice, to match what the artist was supposed to do for the song that he was like helping to tailor. So in Genuine's Pony, that's Static singing the hook.
That part I didn't know that.
Yeah. So, you know, it's like, I believe there's parts that are layered with Genuine, but, and I don't quote me on this one, but I think the same is on So Anxious as well, where I think it's just, he just has, there's just a thing, you know, and so another example of that is in Are You That Somebody? He's the one, the primary, sometimes I'm goody.
Right now I'm naughty, yeah.
So, and how, like, he was able to almost meet Aaliyah at her vocal range. And the thing that I think was just the best part about the working relationship between Aaliyah and Static Major, and for anyone else who's listening who wasn't sure about him, you know, obviously he was in Playa, who had the song Cheers to You, hits and stuff. And also Static was part of just Missy and Timbaland's work, and just an all around, just brilliant human. But the thing about their working relationship is Static had a very different vision and a mission for Aaliyah than I think Timbaland and Missy did, and then the guy that she first started with. You know, Timbaland and Missy were very much big on pulling out Aaliyah's strengths as well. But because Timbaland and Missy were such artists and so focused in what it was that they did, you know, Missy writing the songs, Timbaland producing, the two of them kind of coming together and creating these works, you know, they would kind of package these songs and like give them to Aaliyah, who would go into the booth, and usually it was just her and the engineer, Jimmy Douglas, and Aaliyah would, you know, sing the lyrics, and like if there was something that she wanted to change, she would improvise as she was singing the song. Right. Static was different. Their relationship was different. The working relationship was he would get in a room with her and be like, okay, what do you want to talk about today? And she would say whatever, and like he would come up with a line, and then she would come up with a line, and then the two of them would come up with the song together, and then go into the booth, and you know, Aaliyah would do something, and Static would be like, no, louder, you know, do this with more. He was there. He was very much a part of the process. It was very different for her. And I think by the time that project happened, you know, it was primarily recorded in Australia while Aaliyah was filming Queen of the Damned. And there was only a handful of people at that point who were working on that project. You know, it was Static, you know, Tank had written some songs, Eric Seats, you know, Butter, like, you know, Rapture, like there was just, you know, a bunch of new players in the mix. And I think it was also because, you know, Aaliyah was kind of transitioning into this new iteration of herself, right? She was heading into Hollywood. There had been 5 years in between albums at that point, right? Not including the fact that there, you know, we're not including Romeo Must Die, where she, and like all of like the kind of the collaborations she had done. But third album, there was a 5-year gap, right? Because so much had happened during that time period, you know, the Tommy campaign, you know, Romeo Must Die, you know, the starting of Queen of the Damned. There was just a lot going on. So by the time she got to this project, you're talking about Aaliyah, a full-fledged star. It was very different from the 1 in a Million situation. 1 in a Million was kind of pieced together because so many people, so many producers didn't want to work with Aaliyah once she left the other guy. They were afraid of what that would mean for their own careers, and maybe not get to work with him again at some point.
And that is so surprising to me when I was reading that they would think she has the talent, she has the vocal capability, but no one wanted to work with her on any kind of project whatsoever because of, as you put it beautifully, the other guy, and how much that his influential control of was, you know, with the beginning stages of her career. I was really surprised by that. That I didn't know.
I don't think people, I'm going to give humanity the benefit of the doubt, though I do know that there are people who understood the magnitude of the destruction that he was causing to just a number of young Black women. But we're going to give people the benefit of the doubt when we talk about this right now, right? Give them the benefit of the doubt and say that they didn't understand the magnitude of what was happening and what exactly was going on. We can say they had the John and Yoko mentality of, you know, oh, I guess they just fell in love in the studio, not even thinking about the fact that she was 14 years old and he was 26, 15, 27, whatever. They're like, let's wipe that away. In the minds of people in the music industry, you're talking about one of the biggest, if not the biggest R&B artist in the industry, right? He was completely, all the superlatives were being thrown at him as like the R&B god. So they didn't understand what that meant. And it was one of those things where they probably were like, okay, I don't know, you know, it's like which friends do you keep after a breakup kind of a thing, right? Like that. And I'm gonna, you know, guess that's what the situation was. But I also want to shout out, you know, there's a lot of people who did work with Aaliyah, right? Jermaine Dupri, you know, Dark Child, Puffy was going to work with her. You know, she was supposed to be working on Biggie's album. You know, she had flown out to the islands with all of them to work, but then, you know, she got called back because a couple of producers had jumped on her project, you know, KG from Naughty by Nature, and then Tretch came in. Well, there was a lot of people who did rise to the occasion. So I don't want to necessarily say like nobody wanted to work with Aaliyah. There were people who were like, no, I mean, they recognized the talent, but I think we were at a point where people didn't quite understand until the next album and the album after that the talent was in her and not the environment surrounding her, because the only constant in all of these things was her. You're talking about an artist who for 3 projects, her teams were entirely different each time around. And the person who kept growing in her genius was Aaliyah, right? So by the time we got to that final project, there was no way, shape, or form that you can say the person who was standing over her in the studio was the reason why the product was so brilliant. It all came together by the last project, where when you listen, you can understand that she's the constant and she's the reason. So, you know, backtracking to going into One in a Million, you're talking about a project that's kind of piecemealed together, right? You have one half of the project that's this producer jumped on, that producer jumped on, this producer, whatever. And then you got the other half that's straight Timbaland and Missy. And it came from Timbaland and Missy being advised by someone at Atlantic, I think it was Craig Kalman, to throw their hat in the ring, right? Take a chance to kind of audition for this project, right? So they came and they had this song, and Barry Hankerson and his son Jomo heard it, and they were like, this sounds too kiddie for her, you know. You know, unfortunately, like, you can't, a 15-year-old was singing AJ Nothing But a Number, you can't go, now she's 17, and have her start talking about bubblegum, you know. So, but Aaliyah listened, and what the song was it was Timbaland's first, you know, foray into that signature sound that he had, you know, with the blippity blips and the sound, the production, and the way that the song was, like, Missy was, like, the way that they put it together. Aaliyah was like, okay, fine, you don't like the song, but I hear something in these musicians. So they went and they flew out and met with Aaliyah, and they cut songs together. And then that's how they got back on. That's how they got on to do the remainder of that project. And Genuine, so they didn't even have studio time for this at this point. So Genuine was recording Genuine the Bachelor.
This I didn't know. And
he surrendered his studio time so Aaliyah could work. And I think this was the first moment of like, you know, teamwork, right? Like this is now you have a community of people that really just genuinely want her to win.
Because how many artists do you know that would do that? They would give up their studio time, you know what I mean, to take a chance on
his debut album too.
Yeah.
Like it's, you know, he was working on his album. Like it's not.
I saw it as a win-win because both of their projects were phenomenal. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was an act of generosity, and you know, in really wanting this artist to kind of to work with her, and I think it just tightened the bond amongst all of them.
I think it was. Would you say it tightened the trust level too? Because going from the trust level of the person that she was with and on their first album to, you know, now Timba and Missy, Genuine, Static. When I was reading it, I just saw two different types of trust. If it's, you know, if you understand what I'm saying. So you saw, you know, a young girl that was in a trust of someone, but it was just like intertwined with all his intertwinings. And like you said, he was well known in the R&B world, pretty much untouchable. He had the vocal and all the talent to back it up. And then you have a team with you, which I don't know if and I want you to answer this, where they truly wanted her to win, and possibly that was something that was foreign to her because she didn't feel that the first time around, but she's accepting that now with people that she's surrounded by that want to enhance her talent, her vocal range, the music, the lyrics. They truly, genuinely wanted her to do well.
I think it was a shift. The narrative for the first project was, I want us to win. The narrative in the second project was, we want you to win. And then together we will all win. And I think that's a very different language, right? A different kind of like what is perceived to be a love language from the first project into the second. And we won't go too deeply into this, but we don't know, because she wasn't allowed to speak on it. We don't know the depths of the trauma that she held from that situation. So the fact that she found a sense of community with this next collective, there had to be something special there, because
a safe space, a
very safe space. And I think we would be all kidding ourselves to assume that she left that first situation and didn't feel an ounce of emotion or trauma or some sort of pain from it. I mean, let's be very realistic. And like the thing was, when she was doing her songwriting for the final album, a lot of the songwriting was her backtracking and thinking about what she had endured from 95. So there's also that, right? So if you listen to a lot of those songs, you hear something very different from what you had ever heard from her, because I think she was in that point of like deep reflection. You know, she was 22 years old and recognizing things and hearing and thinking about things a little differently. But yeah, you know, the story was different. These are people who were like, all right, I'll give up my studio time. Okay, I'm just gonna fly out and audition for you. Like I want, you know, her career started with her auditioning for that guy, and then it moved into them auditioning for her. There's a difference, right?
Yes.
So I think there is kind of like the energy was completely different, and it was something she needed and something she deserved. She deserved, you know, at the end of the day.
We saw a transition from, you know, Aaliyah with, like I said, again, she was the trendsetter when it came to fashion, but we saw a shift in that where we're seeing Aaliyah, the stunning version of her. You know, she had that sex appeal where, you know, she had the, you know, the midriff and, you know, still the baggy pants, you know, that many of her followers and those that, you know, idolized her love that kind of dress. Well, we saw a little bit more midriff, we saw a little bit more skin, we saw a bit longer hair, part of it over her eye, you know, rumors saying that she had a lazy eye. I was like, whatever, she was stunning, it didn't matter, who cares? But I think of the video, Try Again. Just, God, she was just absolutely, just the dance and the vocals and, you know, how the video all came together, and just she was just gorgeous. in that video. And I, like, while I'm talking to you, while I was reading the book too, while I'm talking to you, I just see that replaying over and over in my head. It's just how just beautiful, absolutely beautiful she was in that video. And then coming to her own, I just felt watching that video, and I was, when I was getting the notes and everything together the other night, I was watching and I'm like, she feels comfortable and felt comfortable of her inside and outside beauty. Whether, it was the director saying you need to do more of this or the steps or anything else, I took it as, okay, I'm watching this video. She had the lyrics, she had the talent, she has the beauty and everything else. But it seemed like that she embraced all of that herself.
She did. It's hard to watch that now and not feel like we were robbed because she left 3 years later.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, well, Try Again. It was Try Again came out in 2000? Yeah.
I think it was 2000, yeah.
Yeah, a year later. Because, I was thinking, Are You That Somebody? That was 98. But it was hard to it's hard to look at that and feel like she was on the precipice of something, right? There was an evolution that was happening within her. She was an adult, a young adult now, and she was entering into just like womanhood, right? And like it's I don't know. It's bittersweet watching those things because you remember the emotions of like watching it when it was happening in real time, but then you think about just like all the what ifs. But it was a turning point for her, and I think in turn was a turning point for pop music because the direction that pop was going in following what Aaliyah did in that song, and then in going into the last album is really the framework for modern pop music. And I would be One in a Million as well, but it was the way that Aaliyah was like experimenting with different genres, the way that she was kind of changing things up. It set a standard for what we're still experiencing. 22 later.
It's incredible. I'll throw, as you mentioned, Are You That Somebody in there too. And the fun fact you put in there that was just like, oh my gosh, I never knew about that, was the baby sound in there and how that came about. Yeah, I didn't know that, because I promise you, Kathy, when that song came out and everybody heard the baby sound, they were like immediately, when did Aaliyah have a baby? Is that her baby? Is that her, I'm going, wait, what? Don't ruin the song by doing all these conspiracy theories of this, I mean, she's got masterminds that are doing the sound, and you got Timbaland and the hook and all of that stuff. But tell everybody the once and for all, so that people can stop the little theories and those that are thinking of it. The little baby cooing sound, the laughing sound that's in the song itself, how that idea came about.
Well, it was definitely not, the like Aaliyah, some, child of Aaliyah's, nor was it, another rumor that they said that it was pulled from home videos of Aaliyah as a baby. That wasn't true. So they had to, they were given like just a couple of hours to put this song together. There was an opportunity to get on the NYU Professor soundtrack, and was it NYU Professor? Dr. Dolittle, Kathy. NYU Professor, okay. No, Dr. Dolittle.
Same actor in both ones, yes.
Right.
Eddie Murphy.
And both like banging soundtracks. I mean,
yes.
Go there. But Dr. Dolittle. And with the soundtrack, there was this opportunity to get a song, and Barry had told the label that they had a song already, and they didn't. And they were out in LA, I believe it was, and he came back and he's like, hey, I told them we had this song, and they were gonna pay like an exuberant amount of money for it, so they were like, all right, I guess we gotta do this song, right?
Right.
So the whole song together. Static had already had lyrics, and Timbaland was messing with the sound, this like beat and whatever. At first Aaliyah was like, but then she started to like it. And then at the end of the whole thing, they're done with the beat and everything. Timbaland was like, wait a minute, this needs something. And he pulls out this CD of like this baby. And he's like, and like adds it into the song. And there, you know, when I speak to Jimmy, the engineer on the song, about this, and he was like, it was really not, you know, people over the years have searched for a deeper meaning to why this actually was on the song. And it really was just Timbaland hearing this song and being like, what can I add to this to just be like, oh, what? And then him just running and getting a baby noise. Like, and it was just, it's funny because he just like kind of put it in, and then, you know, Aaliyah heard it and she was like, oh, that's cute. Like the baby sound is cute. And that's how it happened. Yeah, not Aaliyah's home videos of either her or, you know, anyone else.
And it intertwining Timbaland, correct me if I'm wrong, calling her baby girl.
It was the first time on record that he called her that. And like, you know, obviously it later birthed the title of my book, you know, Baby Girl, better known as Aaliyah. So yeah, that was the first time that we as the fans heard her be called that on record. And you know, obviously it led to so many people who adored her, either personally or from a distance, calling her baby girl.
Right. So you got Aaliyah, this amazing talent, vocal artist, can sing, and you know, choreographer. Then you have now Aaliyah, the actress. And a staple movie that I will watch, and if it was the only movie left, I don't care, is Romeo Must Die. For some reason, I like that movie. I like the movie. I know that people were looking for, because I know that she was, her and Jet Li, despite also they had a huge age difference as well. I don't know, something about that movie to me was just so full of action. I respect her for doing her own stunts. That she did not want a stunt double, which is a very bold move. And was that her first movie that she was in, Romeo Must Die, her first acting role?
Well, not her first acting role, because, you know, she was like a child of off Broadway back in Detroit.
Yeah, that's right.
Like that. And I believe it was her first
motion
film.
Picture. Okay.
Yeah, it was definitely her first film, but I don't know, you know, because there was like Aaliyah, I feel like she did like guest on like TV shows, you know, something, you know, on film, but not, this was definitely her first movie. Yeah.
And it's amazing how much of a natural she was in there. Like, you'll get ones that, it's a very rare find where you'll have that person that it's their very first big picture, motion picture, and it just, as many times as they rehearse and the script and everything else, and it seems like that they're supposed to be a fit, and, you know, you'll hear about it or read about it in Rotten Tomatoes and other critics, they'll talk about it as well. I didn't see that with Romeo Must Die. A lot of people that, and again, you know, going back to my college years and then leaving out of college, love the movie. I remember going to, in my hometown of Lansing, seeing it in one of the AMC theaters, and it was packed. It was packed that night because, I mean, you had girls that was dressing like Aaliyah and everything else. And, and there was a few naysayers, they were saying, okay, you got this Asian dude, you got this Black woman, how in the world is this gonna work out? But overall, like at the end, I remember people leaving out the theater and just giving a standing ovation to her, and how she naturally gravitated to that role of I'm trying to think of the name of the person, the character that she was. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, for me, that was just one of those classic films that I will put that in the top 10 because her performance alone.
It is. It's a really good film. And you know, we got to remember, in high school, Aaliyah majored in film and dance, right? So she, as a kid, she auditioned for the role of Judy Winslow, Family Matters. So she was trying to get into acting kind of at the same time as singing. So there was kind of this parallel that had run, but I think once the music took off, the rest, you know, that kind of that part of the career was like kind of put on hold until Romeo Must Die. But I think she had also been waiting out for something that she felt was like authentic to her, and I think there was a lot of similarities between like the Trish character and Aaliyah, you know, and which I think really played into her decision to want to take on this role. And, you know, people would say when she played Akasha in Queen of the Damned, that it was like kind of a straying from who she was, which is something that she wanted to do by that next project. But because Aaliyah was so fascinated with Egyptology, there was some kind of, you know, synergy between the Akasha character, you know, because she's the mother of all vampires, she's an Egyptian, you know, vampire. So it was, there was still some sort of kind of like, you know, synchronicity going on there, that it still spoke to something that Aaliyah was very much into. And I heard, I mean, I don't know how, I heard this throughout when I was working on the book, but I didn't want to include it because I couldn't get enough confirmation, but she had also auditioned for the role of Storm in X-Men, from what I heard. And like they had tapped her to play it, but it didn't work out. And, you know, obviously she was going to play Z in the Matrix films. So, but I heard all from X-Men. So, I mean, there's some superhero, you know, elements of what it was Aaliyah was going to do in her next acting roles, which I thought would be really cool too.
I just someone that is an artist, and you said, you know, she had a background in film and acting, and you know, I applaud those that, you know, they're not just musicians, you know, that everybody knows them for singing, but they broaden their talents to, you know, motion pictures and films and everything else. And then we see, you know, I don't know what, a year or two later, that all of a sudden she's on the biggest stage ever, the youngest to do it, and that's the Academy Awards. And I will never forget that, because I watched it that night, and just, you know, number one, her whole attire, you know, because you're used to the crop top, the baggy jeans and all of that, and, you know, the amazing appeal that she had, but her coming out in that just beautiful black gown, owning the stage, singing from the movie Anastasia, just carrying just this, and I was watching it the other night, and it just gave me chills all over again, as it did that night when I watched it years ago. Her presence, how she just captured the audience just singing that song. It was something that I will never forget. And again, and I will keep saying this over and over again, just the essence and maturity of her vocals. It's beautiful.
She was just unbelievable. You know, I think that there was just, this was you only get like one Aaliyah in a lifetime. And I think that was something that I really feel like we're only slowly beginning to realize that now, right?
Why do you think that is?
Well, I think for a number of reasons, right? I think, first off, she left so suddenly, right? Like, nobody predicted that she would die in a plane crash at 22 years old. You know, that nobody saw that coming, and nobody would also see coming that a few weeks later 9/11 would happen. So I think that the grief was taken from us as the fans, right? We were robbed of the ability to kind of really understand what was happening, because it was like one tragedy after the other, right? The other was like Aaliyah was on a global scale too, but, you know, 9/11 was a different kind of global tragedy. So I think we lost the ability to sit and really think about what we lost, right? We lost. So there's that. The other thing is, we were still very much a part of an era that was still unfolding, right? So it's kind of hard to see what the through line is and where that concept of a legacy really begins and ends, right? Because it was still happening. And, you know, for a very long time, you know, we didn't have, when streaming music started, we didn't have Aaliyah. Like, there was no line to draw where you can like listen to one song and then go to Aaliyah's and the influence, right? You had that, right? So you're talking about the concept of understanding the impact of the legacy. We were part of an era in music, which I think is still a problem today, where we don't give enough Black female artists their flowers and what they actually create, to the world in terms of
Say that.
invention. So it's one thing to have like a great album, right? To be a great singer. It's another thing to give credit for creating an entire movement. And I think that is something that's still very much missing in the narrative as it pertains to honoring Black women specifically. It's always what a monumental album, what a great artist. But it's like, no, this artist created a movement that people have then taken and incorporated it into their own personal ethos or whatever, right? Like that, you know, so that was definitely an era where, it's still going on today, but we weren't acknowledging who it was that was in the driver's seat of all of that. I think that, truth be told, the 1984, 1995 era followed her through the end of her life. So there was always going to be someone who would bring this up. And it was almost like, it was like the stigma, right? And it had continued even obviously into her passing. But I think because we are now all universally understanding of who that man truly is and how demonic he is, now that we all understand that, right? We can take the stigma away from Aaliyah and just leave it in his lap where it belongs. And I think when you remove that side conversation that people still had, and if you worked in the music industry, not a single room didn't whisper those rumors or stories whenever her name was mentioned, even, after she passed. When we can remove that piece away from her, because she doesn't need it, she's a survivor, not a victim, right? Not a wife, not a girlfriend, a survivor. When you give that to her, and then when you look at all of these artists who have taken a page from her playbook, when you look at how for 3 projects, she was the thread, she was the nucleus. When you look at how people are still dressing like her, still sampling her, still copying her, right? I think it's only now, right, that we can look at it all in the big picture and say, this woman was a once in a lifetime human. This was a person who was born to change the world and unfortunately could only stay for like 2 decades before she had to leave. And I think, but it took this almost the same amount of time of her entire life, right, for everyone to finally understand who it was that Aaliyah was and what she contributed to the world as a whole. And my goal with the book was to really just put it all in between pages, right? To put that all together so that you can open it and then you can read the progression. And by the time you get to the end where I'm still talking about the future, you can then understand that this woman changed the world, right? She changed music, she changed fashion, she even changed film in a number of ways, right? When you see the way sci-fi films work female characters in, there are so many nods to Akasha. How Aaliyah,
I didn't think about that. So you just said that. Wow. Yeah.
Right. So again, this was a person who was never going to be replicated, and people may try. It's never going to happen. So I think it's just very important that we just make sure that we honor her. And I do hope that the next honoring of Aaliyah, well, 2 things I hope for her. She needs a VMA Vanguard Award, right? But she also needs a star in the Hollywood Walk of Fame.
Agreed.
Like, these are things that these should be no-brainers. The fact that these things haven't happened yet, it just blows my mind.
And I was hoping in her lifetime she would won a Grammy Award. Because like you and I just had said in this conversation, when her record, when her album One in a Million came out, it was just loaded with all of that talent that was also nominated, because that female class for best record, best artist, and so forth. You mean, it was absolutely loaded. And I believe it was Lauryn Hill's The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill. That was just that album that was on everything. I mean, I had that album too, wore it out, and then she swept every category. But you know, as you were saying, you know, the influence of Aaliyah, and I remember too when MAC makeup came out with a whole series of her, and that sold out immediately online in a couple of the malls and the stores that had, you know, the whole MAC display. You saw this small little display where her picture was and where the example, you know, there's makeup samples were at. And then every other thing that was it, the blushes, the lipsticks, all that was gone. And I had asked the manager, I said, how long was this on display? He goes, today. And I said, oh, and how long did it take you? He goes, 2 hours. We sold out in 2 hours. He goes, I was trying to call other stores to see if they had her set. And they said, and he said, one of the managers was laughing and kept laughing. She goes, I'm not trying to be rude, but we sold out in 45 minutes.
Oh my gosh.
And that's why she kept laughing. She's like, yeah, good luck trying to find anything of that. So her legacy and her influence, as you said, it just carried on to today and then some. I remember August 25th, 2001. I remember it wasn't MTV that I found out. And I verified it afterwards. I remember it was announced on the Today Show. I thought it was a joke. I'm like, there's no way.
Right.
There's no way. She's this beautiful star. She's got everything going for her. She's dropped this new music. She's got all this happening, working on her, you know, third album. There's no way. And me and my, you know, young mind, I'm like, okay, well, to verify that it's true, I'm going to see if MTV has breaking news. Because MTV, you know, you and I know, when they played videos all the time before reality TV, that's where you went for your music source, you know, as well as BET, and they had to come up in 106 in Park and all that. And it wasn't, and I can't remember the VJ's name that was on there, and it was just like he was holding back every kind of tear possible, excuse me, that announced her passing. I was numb. Take me back to where you were at when you found out about her passing.
It was around 11 o'clock at night. I was in a diner parking lot in New Jersey. And it's like, it was the, you know, I was in my last, I had graduated from college in that May. So this diner we would all go to was like right on the side of where my university was, right? And even after I graduated, we were just always there. So my friend and I had gone to we had eaten like a late dinner, just like met at the diner after that, and like eat or whatever. And when, you know, he had one of those cars that you know, the systems, like when you go, like the whole thing would shake, and it was big speakers and whatever. And he had like the sports muffler. Like it was just one of those, I could call it a sports muffler. I know nothing about cars, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, I do.
So he starts the car and you hear, I heard Angie Martinez's voice. And that was Angie Shift. So I was like, I wonder why, because, you know, Hot 97 was on his radio. I was like, I wonder why Angie's talking. And, you know, it wasn't like in the, you know, this is Angie Martinez. Like it wasn't that kind of Angie, right? It was like very solemn, like she was very solemn. And I was like, So I was walking in my car and I'm just like walking slowly, like trying to listen to what's going on. And my friend was like, hey, he's like, I think Aaliyah died in a plane crash. And like, I stopped and, you know, in the book, I say, like, I said, you know, when like the sound leaves a room, well, it felt like the sound had left the entire planet. Because like I stood and I just felt like everything on wah, when he said that, right? And I was like, what? Like, you know, so I get back, I go over to his car and I sit in the passenger seat and we're listening on the radio. And, you know, they're reporting the details. it happened around 6:00 in the Bahamas. We didn't get word until like 11 something, but most of the news outlets didn't report on it until after midnight, which is why the stories say August 26th for the most part. And obviously daytime television that followed on that, I think like Sunday morning, obviously had a different timestamp on it. Right. So we were sitting there listening, and I was just like, it was one of those things where, you're just like in such disbelief. And then driving home, and I'm like changing stations, you're going to Hot 97, Z100, Power 105, 103.5, 98.7. Like you're just, and it's all Aaliyah playing. And I'm like sobbing, like I'm talking like in the car ride, right? And I got home and my eyes were swollen, like they were so big. And I got into the house and my mother was like, what happened? Like, yeah. And I was like, Aaliyah died in a plane crash. And she was just like, oh, honey, like, I'm like, and she felt it, because that moment for me, it was different when, I was really hurt. And, I cried when Tupac died. I cried when Biggie died. I even cried when Kurt Cobain died, right? But it wasn't like when Aaliyah died, right? Like it was different. Those artists were like artists I liked and listened to and felt connected to their music. Right. But Aaliyah felt like my friend. Like I felt like my friend died. Right? And that was where, that hurt was very different. And it was it still hurts to talk about it. And and I think it's because when someone, obviously without knowing it, shapes your identity so much, right? And has become a part of you, and they pass away, it was one of those things where it was hard, and also we're the same age. We were born like a month apart. And, I had just graduated college, like, and you're starting your life or whatever. And Aaliyah died, and it was just, it was terrible. It hurt. And, I went to like, I drove by like, the funeral, and, I didn't actually like actively get out of my car and stand amongst everyone, until her 2-year anniversary. Right. When I covered, the anniversary at Ferncliff. And that was when I actually like went out. I don't know what it was that like, I couldn't bring myself. And I also like the traffic in New York City during that funeral was just like unbelievable. Right. But like, you want to see, like, I don't know, say you want to be a part of it, but like you do, like you felt it, like, so it was like just driving there and just being a part of the crowd. Right. You just wanted that moment of making peace with the situation for yourself. Like, again, it was just this like need for closure. Like I felt, and I can say this with confidence, that like it wasn't until I like wrote the last word of the book that I feel like I finally had closure in dealing with the death of Aaliyah. So what I had hoped for too with the book was to give another person a sense of closure in reading the book, because I don't know what it was, like I couldn't go to the, like, whether it was the funeral, whether it was the anniversary, no matter what, I didn't feel like the chapters were closed. And maybe it also had to do with the fact that we connect us for music. Maybe it was like a combination of all these, but I didn't feel like I had closure from it. Right. And I know that there were other people that felt the same way. Right.
That's what I was going to say. I felt that with the last parts that I read in the book, but I also felt that, Kathy, was with the chapter 4-page letters. Yeah. And all the letters that were in there. And I was not prepared to have a bunch of emotion that I did when I was reading them. And that's why I recommend people that really, really, they say they're fans of hip hop and Aaliyah to really get this book, because I don't want to give away these amazing letters. And the beautiful thing of seeing these fans write to Aaliyah is that the age range that you have in there, from someone that is in their teens, someone that's in their mid 30s. I mean, you got all different kinds, and I'm sure that you could have put hundreds and hundreds and thousands of other letters in this
so
book.
many letters too, and it was, you know, unfortunately, like I wish we had thought this roll out better, you know, to have made a, let's say, a website. Some of the letters we were working to put on the web and kind of at least, you know, make something work in that way. But it was there were so many letters to choose from, and you know, reading them was just it was like a gut punch, because I remember like there was a theme with some of the younger fans where they would hear Aaliyah on the radio, and they, you know, would go and look her up on YouTube and watch the videos. Like, this one fan had this experience where he went to his mom and said, I want to see Aaliyah in concert. And she said, I'm sorry, baby, she died, you know, in 2001. And that's when he found out Aaliyah died. You know, I was in a parking lot in college, leaving college. He was 8 years old, I think it was. I mean, there was a couple of instances of this exact moment. He was a kid, or she was a kid, like, you know, and the mother was like, no, Aaliyah died. And that's when that person learned that Aaliyah died. We all have that story, even if it's years and years after her passing, because you're not introduced as a kid when you're learning about music to, hey, here's this deceased artist. You know, that's not the first thing you say when you press play on a song, right? You just press play on the song, you fall in love with the song, you fall in love with the artist, then you find out the artist isn't here, which is a different kind of emotional pain and grief, right? So yeah, reading those letters, it was like, I'm so happy I put them in, because that it really, like, you had, like, there was fans from Brazil and, you know, Canada and Kentucky. I mean, they're everywhere. And
I mean, fans as young as 11 years old that talked about in depth about how they researched Aaliyah, went on YouTube, you know, saw the beautiful images that you and I talked about that we actually got to see, because, you know, thank God that we lived in the era of the 90s. It was, you know, witness to the genre of music and the hip hop and new jack swing and all of that. And it's amazing what one woman has done for that era then as well as now. It's incredible how many people are discovering her, who she was and what she left behind. And as I said to you, her music is just absolutely timeless. You can put it on and think it was recorded a year ago, a month ago, a week ago, because that is just the amazing craft that she had vocally. It's just a true gift that left us way too soon. Last question for you, Kathy. I want to ask you, you know, this amazing book that I'm giving away to two people that you're going to kindly autograph, and I thank you for that. If Aaliyah was still here and saw that you just journeyed her so well in here, what do you think she would say to you? What in your head? Because I don't know, like, after you wrote, you know, the part, and like I said, you and I said, you know, at that last bit of the chapters, and, you know, you're going on to the, you know, 4-page letters and everything else in the studio imagery that you had beautifully at the end of the book. What do you think that she would say to you after all that was written, after all that is said? Because I'm just wondering if you ever thought about that while you was writing it, all these just incredible. And side note, this is the only time that I've read a book twice, and this is it. What do you think she would say?
I don't really know, but I can tell you what I said to her.
Okay.
When I finished the book, I said out loud, I'm sorry we couldn't do this together. And that, I hope, I would think, I would want to believe that if we would have done the book together. we would have co-authored the book together. That's what I would hope. So if she were here, the book might have looked completely different too, because, you know, I wasn't in her head, right? Like I had to go into other people's heads and read articles and try to kind of deduce for myself, which is why I tried to make it as objective as possible. But if she were here, you know, it would be an entirely different book. I don't doubt in many ways, because it would be coming from her voice. But, you know, I would hope that she would say, you know, we did it. We put out a book, right? You know, that's what I would hope. I don't, there would be so many different circumstances if Aaliyah were here, just for myself as a writer for the planet. So, but yeah, the thing I did say when I finished the book was like, I wish we did this together. Yeah. And yeah, I mean, I hope that up there, you know, she's happy with the book. That's all you can really ask for is, you know, I hope she knows that she was painted in the brightest light, you know, because that's what she was just light. She was energy. She was everything. So yeah.
She was light, street, but sweet, an icon, a legend, gone from us way too soon. A person that put 7 to 8 bookmarks up in here, from lamps, or not lamps, but postage stamp coverings to all different kinds of envelopes. I mean, this is a phenomenal read.
Thank you.
Baby girl, better known as Aaliyah. Wherever books are sold, pick it up. You know, support Kathy in this, because she did the dang thing. Where can they follow you on social media, my friend?
On Instagram and Twitter, Kath3000, KATH3000.
What's the 3000 stand for?
Andre 3000.
Yes, I was hoping you said that. Yes, y'all, pick up this book. It is a phenomenal read. She has done the research. And for someone like myself that is more of a person that will, you know, do books on tape and all that stuff, and her causing my kind of history of reading it twice is worth a read. Kathy, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for listening and Heard That Nation. I appreciate you. And as I always end the show, take care, stay safe. We out.